Hi and welcome back to ScottiesTech.Info. I'm Scotty with my co-host Cletus, and today I want to talk about these magical things like these pendants, such as the Q-Link that you wear around your neck, for example, and supposedly they're going to protect you from electromagnetic fields and radio frequency radiation, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that sort of thing. So these things have been around since, many of them, for example, the Q-Link has been around since 1991, I think. They've been around for a long time, and many people are asking me lately, especially after my recent videos on 5G, they keep asking me, like, do these things actually work? Now, right. So initially, I kind of took a quick look at these things like many years ago, and based on the description of how they work, I concluded that no, it's just a bunch of bunk, they don't work. And the reason I concluded that was because I essentially applied what I understand of how electronics work, and I assumed that the thing was an electronic device, and as an electronic device, as I understand it, no, they can't possibly work as described. However, then I had an interesting experience recently. After my recent video, 5G runs into roadblocks, I was present at a social gathering, and what happened is one of my friends who is a medical doctor said, yeah, I have a Q-Link, and yeah, it's pretty great. I think it works really well. And then other friends present then turned to me, of course, and said, hey, Scotty, you just did that video on 5G. Do you think these things like the Q-Link will protect us from 5G? And I kind of went like, maybe? Because the first friend who has a Q-Link, she is a medical doctor. She actually started off as a heart surgeon. So when a freaking heart surgeon says to you, like, yeah, I have a Q-Link and it's great and it works and it helps me a lot, that tends to sort of give me pause and make me think, maybe I should go back and reevaluate this thing. Maybe I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe there's some things about it that I don't know. I should note that my doctor friend, she said that she usually wears the Q-Link. She has just the pendant one you wear around your neck, and she uses it especially like if she's going to be in like a big city. There's lots of Wi-Fi, there's lots of cell phone signals, and she wears it, and generally she feels better. She has increased focus. She feels better. She even noted that if she wears it while she sleeps, she has particularly lucid dreams, and she sleeps very well. So this was kind of a ringing endorsement of the thing from a heart surgeon, no less. And so I'm kind of going, right. So, yeah. So I went back and I took another look at it. And of course, as I said, many people are asking me about these things. And I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. If it works, use it. And, but as I said, my initial take on it was like, nah, it can't possibly work. But, you know, I can be wrong. So because this specific gizmo, there are many types of these things. The Q-Link is probably the most popular, so that's the one that I looked at. The Q-Link has been around since 1991. Back then, it was like people were starting to use computers more and more, and it was, you know, cell phones started to become popular. But, you know, in 1991, there were no smartphones. Wi-Fi wasn't released to the public until 2001. There was no, you know, 4G or 5G or any of that, but we were starting to have all these electronics and to be sort of sitting in the middle of them all the time. So that's when this thing was first released, and currently they are on, I believe, their third version. So the first thing I did, of course, is I went to the Q-Link website, and it says that it uses SRT, or sympathetic resonance technology, and I'll just read the blurb here to start with. So they say Q-Link products are programmed with an array of natural frequencies that resonate with the body's natural energy frequencies. The resulting resonant effect is similar to the healthy, energizing experiences we have in nature, in positive interactions with others, and while participating in self-balancing, restorative activities. And because it takes less effort and energy to maintain an object already functioning at more ideal resonance frequencies, the more often you wear or use Q-Link, the better it can work for you. Okay, so the idea here is that this thing has some sort of crystals or something inside, and it tunes to your body's natural energy frequency, some description. There have been studies that show that like individual cells have sort of natural like electric magnetic field, some natural, like, fields that we understand, energy fields around them. So of course, the body itself would then, therefore, according to this idea, also have its own field. And we have natural frequencies. There's a Schumann resonance, 7.83 hertz, which is the result of like the ionosphere and the Earth and lightning strikes. And the Earth kind of has its own natural frequencies. The body has its own natural frequencies. So the idea of this thing is that somehow it's got a little coil of copper wire, and that is supposed to pick up something like little electrical impulses that are generated from your body's own natural sort of EMF fields and sort of resonate with it and kind of send them back and sort of reinforce your natural frequencies. Now, as I said, electronically, I don't know how that would possibly work. But you can go on their website and they have all kinds of studies that were done. Okay, so in other words, like, is there any proof that it works? So, there was a study done at the University of Vienna, which was published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine, that showed that human tissue cells were more resistant to chemical stress when one of these Q-links was actually present. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. There were many studies, but this is just a couple of them. There was also an Australian doctor who is, I believe he's a psychologist, a doctor, PhD, and he, in Australia, and he showed in a study of 24 normal adults, they took EEGs of their noggins, and then they wore the Q-link, and he found that when those 24 normal adults were exposed to EMF and they were wearing a Q-link, their EEGs indicated reduced bad effects. Okay, now this particular guy, you can look at the study. For a lot of these studies they link to, you have to pay like $51 to get the journal. So of course I was going to have to pay several $100s to get them. So I didn't, but many of them actually say it's not just like the abstract, but it's an abstract and a summary of results that is publicly accessible, so you can click and go and read that stuff, so you at least get the gist of what the study was about. Also, this Australian doctor, you can then look up their names, and he's a psychologist who particularly studies the effects of chemicals like drugs, both legal and illegal, and also the effects of EMF on the brain. That's kind of his area of specialty. So, okay, well, that's looking pretty good. It looks like it kind of works. Then there was another TV clip that I found. I'll put the links to all this down in the description as usual. It's a YouTube video. It's very old. It looks like it's from the early 90s. It's labeled that it's from the BBC, but it's the show London Today, which I'm pretty sure is or was on the ITN network. It's ITV or something. It's a UK channel or something. It's a news program, and it was back in the early 90s. They said, okay, this Q-link thing, it's super popular, so we put it to the test. So what they did is two women who worked for the TV studio, he waited until the end of the weekend so they weren't exposed to anything, because one of them was like an editor or something, so she was around all the editing equipment all the time. So the idea was, well, let's wait till after the weekend when she's been, nice, well-rested, not exposed to all these EMFs from the TV equipment and stuff. They took blood samples, then they wore the Q-link for 3 days, then they took blood samples again, and what they found was this massive difference in the quality of the red blood cells. Before wearing the Q-link, it looks like all the blood cells had been through a war, and after wearing the Q-link for 3 days, they were all beautiful and glorious. So then, I thought, well, does the thing actually work? Like, in other words, what do people actually say? Because if people have been buying these things for 28 years, like, well, they must be doing something. So then I scoured the entire internet and I looked for everywhere you could buy one of these things, and I found all kinds of places. I read forums, I went digging everywhere, and Amazon.com is actually a good example, because on Amazon.com, for the Q-link pendant, like this one, your basic one, the SRT3, the latest version, there are 160 reviews, and of those 160 reviews, 58% gave it 5 stars, 9% gave it 4 stars, and 10% gave it 3 stars. So what that means is that if we assume that 4 stars is good and 5 stars is excellent, 67% or over 2/3 of buyers rate this thing as Bob's your uncle. If you add 3 stars, which is, okay, it's good, but maybe it didn't work as well as I expected, that number jumps to 77%. And of course we know that if you buy a product, typically on Amazon, especially, if you buy a product and it sucks, that product's going to have lots of negative reviews. So I thought it was kind of interesting that there were so many positive reviews. One of the reviews on Amazon was a husband who bought the Q-Link and wore it for a few months, and his wife was kind of making fun of him for it. And so he stopped wearing it after a few months for whatever reason. Well, years later, she got sick and she was trying all this traditional treatment and she couldn't get well no matter what she did. So her husband says to her, almost as a joke, "Here, honey, take the Q-Link and wear it." So kind of as a joke, she did, and she put it on and she started feeling better. And she said, "Well, this is nuts." So then she took it off for a few days, started feeling like crap again, put the dang thing back on, started feeling better, and then wrote a review and said, "This thing is great." So, okay, well then you could just say, well, maybe it's just the placebo effect. Of course, the placebo effect is, let's say you have a drug study. Some company wants to test their new drug, so what you do is you get a bunch of people in and you give some of them your magical pill, the new drug. You give the other ones something that looks exactly like the new drug, except it's not, it's actually just a sugar pill. And statistically, what they usually find when they do these drug studies is that some people, because they believe they're getting the magical new drug given to them by a dude in a white coat, they actually get better even though all they took was a sugar pill. That's the placebo effect. Okay, so then you can read about the placebo effect. And once again, modern science comes in here and you know, sort of blows everything apart, because on Wikipedia we can read that an influential 1955 study entitled "The Powerful Placebo" finally established the idea that placebo effects were clinically important and were a result of the brain's role in physical health. But it did not account for regression to the mean or other confounding factors, and reassessments of the data have found no evidence of any placebo effect. They then continue on for like paragraph after paragraph, basically trying to debunk the placebo effect. Now, of course, if mind over body works, you can imagine why certain companies, like say ones that make drugs, would want to poo-poo this, because if being happy and less stressed is actually good for your health, in other words, if, or even simple belief can actually cure you of certain ailments, and you don't need drugs, well then this is obviously not going to be promoted by people who want to make money from selling drugs. But anyway, let's just look at, so they did this study, they said, yes, the placebo effect is real. This was back in 1955. And then they said, oh yeah, but it's invalid because of confounding factors. Well, so what are these confounding factors? They are, number one, regression to the mean, which sounds very fancy, but actually what it is just the person naturally recovered from the illness, or their symptoms naturally fluctuated during the experiment. So therefore you can't say it's the placebo effect, which is pretty retarded. The next thing is the patients in the experiment, if you will, were receiving additional treatments and the experimenters didn't know. In other words, the experimenters were pretty much incompetent, which is not terribly encouraging. Number three, confounding factor, is response bias from the subjects, which basically means that when you're sick and you're feeling like crap and the doctor comes and treats you and then goes away, when he comes back later, because he or she is wearing a white coat and is a doctor, you are more inclined to want to please the doctor by saying, yes, I feel great, which is quite possibly one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, because, yeah, like, if you feel like crap, you're not going to be like, oh yes, doctor, I'm wonderful, don't try and fix me, I love suffering. Like, yeah, so that's a little bit ridiculous. The number four confounding factor is reporting bias from experimenters, which is pretty self-explanatory. In other words, the experimenters are really bad experimenters. And number five is non-inert ingredients in the placebo. In other words, when they made the little sugar pill, it accidentally had something else in it which was causing a positive effect and actually healing the person. So no, it wasn't mind over body. It wasn't the placebo effect. It wasn't the power of belief in a sugar pill that cured them. It was the fact that the experimenters were, again, kind of incompetent. So basically the explanation, the official, supposedly more scientific explanation as to why the placebo effect is invalid, is because people are dumb, and so are the experimenters doing placebo studies, which is not very flattering, or, yeah, that's whatever. But then the Wikipedia article goes on to talk about conditioning, and this was an experiment they did where they took saccharin, which has a particular flavor, and they would mix it with a certain drug that would suppress your immune system, and they'd feed it to people. And of course, the immune-suppressing drug would suppress the people's immune system. Then what they would do is they would remove the immune-suppressing drug and feed them just the saccharin, so it was just the flavor. And what they found is that after the people had been conditioned, just the flavor, the saccharin flavor, caused people's immune systems to become depressed. In other words, their brain associated that particular flavor with, oh, I'm going to feel like crap, and so they did, which is again kind of like mind over body. And they note that such conditioning has been found to affect a diverse variety of not just basic physiological processes in the immune system, but ones such as serum iron levels, oxidative DNA damage levels, and insulin secretion. So basically they acknowledge that the mind is extremely powerful vis-a-vis the body, but only in the negative direction, not in the positive direction, which in my opinion is a tad short-sighted because we're all familiar with the placebo effect. We all know, and we've all had experiences where, yes, belief or, being happier, being less stressed led to an improvement in our immune systems, an improvement in overall health, and so on and so forth. So, right, so there you are. You got these things, there are some studies, but you can't really be sure about the study. Like, you could believe either way depending on, how you want to go. Do you want to be really nitpicky and cynical? Well, then you can just ignore all the studies. However, there are studies that show that they do work, and they have very interesting results. Then you could say, well, the heck with the studies, it's just the placebo effect, but no one can even agree if the placebo effect is real. Mainstream medical science says, no, it's far less real than most people think. Common sense dictates that, yeah, it's very real, and the mind does have a very powerful effect over the body. But okay, maybe you want to ignore that too and keep on being cynical, so then you look at the people and you go, well, people use it and it works. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm going with, is lots of people have bought these things. They're not cheap. This one here in France was about 87 euros. In the US, I think they're $100. They're not inexpensive. I bought one. I've been wearing it for less than a week now. I noticed when I put it on that suddenly I was very focused and was it just that or was it something else? It's hard to say. You're supposed to wear the thing for, 2 months or something to notice effects. I'm also not someone who's particularly electrosensitive, whereas my heart surgeon / medical doctor friend is actually apparently more affected by this stuff, and for her the results were rather amazing, actually. It's also worth noting that there are all kinds of people. They had a bunch of PGA Tour golfers wearing them, claiming that, like, I wore my Q-Link and 5 days later I won this tournament, and people say, oh, it makes you more calm and this and that, and it's all kind of interesting. And so at the end of the day, I pretty much conclude that if you get one and you use it and it works, you're done. Bob's your uncle. Because, you could kind of go either way. If you want to be super scientific about it, know the little thing electronically, as far as I understand it, no, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. But here's the thing. We don't know everything. For example, we understand how gravity acts on an object, but we don't actually know what gravity really is. We don't know exactly how it works, which is why we don't have flying Jetsons cars yet. Even something as simple as water. In the past couple of years, we're discovering new things about water. Frickin' water. That substance that covers most of the earth, we're still learning all kinds of new things. And in terms of, energy fields and that kind of thing, generally speaking, I am open-minded to non-traditional things. I myself am actually a Reiki master. Reiki is a Japanese healing art. It's basically healing hands. Similar to Tai Chi, it's the whole idea of Chi, channeling Chi through your hands. There have been studies done on Reiki that found that, yes, there are very definite effects. And yet many people think, no, it's just a bunch of bunk and it's crazy. I am a Reiki master. I have actually, essentially taught other people to do this, and it works for them too. I have no, scientifically, with where our science is at the moment, no, I cannot fully explain it. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work. My experience is that, yes, it works, and it works very well. So, yeah, at the end of the day, get it and use it, and if it works, get down with your bad self. Right, so there you have it. Let me know below, do you have one of these? Do you have something else similar? Does it work for you? Does it not work for you? Let us know in the comments below. For more techie tips, see ScottiesTech.Info. Thanks for watching. See you next time.